You don't belong here. People can see that. The words cut across the marble lobby like a whip, louder than necessary, sharp enough to quiet the soft harp music playing in the background. Heads turned. The faint trickle of the water wall seemed to stop. Even the candles flickered. The manager of Elon Spa stood stiffly behind the counter, her cream blazer perfectly pressed, her eyes locked on the woman standing just inside the glass doors. Her tone wasn't a slip. It was deliberate, calculated. Danielle Hayes didn't flinch. She stood there, still, her presence somehow louder than the insult. 39. Tall, poised. Tailored ivory trousers. A silk blouse the color of pale moonlight. Flat black shoes. No designer logos. No sparkling diamonds. No assistant by her side. Only a small black leather tote resting on her forearm, and a quiet power that settled into the room like a storm no one saw coming. The manager's gaze swept over her, and she smiled. A small, mocking smile. Danielle looked around the room once, briefly. A woman in a white robe clutched her cucumber water tighter. A couple near the window exchanged whispers. A man in gym clothes stared openly, his phone halfway raised already. Danielle's voice, when it came, was calm and even. I have a reservation. Run my name. The manager tilted her head, her lips curling as if amused. Our VIP suites, she said loudly, ensuring everyone in the lobby could hear, are reserved for elite members. Real members. Not walk-ins pretending to be something they're not. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. Someone let out a quiet laugh. Another shook her head, almost pitying. Danielle stood motionless. But inside, she felt it, that familiar burn in her chest. The one that had been there since she was 23 and turned away from a hotel lobby despite a paid booking. The same one she felt at 26, told to wait outside while her white assistant was ushered through the velvet ropes first. Years had passed. Deals signed. Empires built. Billions earned. And yet here she was. Again. Her eyes stayed locked on the manager's. Run. My name. The manager smirked, clicking her pen against the counter and scribbling something onto her clipboard. There's a community spa a few blocks down, she replied, flat, final. I think you'd be more comfortable there. Danielle didn't move. Behind the counter, a young attendant, Naomi, froze, her fingers trembling above the keyboard. Her wide eyes darted between the screen, the manager, and Danielle. Something flickered there. Recognition. In the corner, the man in gym clothes lifted his phone higher. The faint glow of recording blinked red. Danielle saw him. Her gaze met his. Calm. Steady. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. He lowered his phone. The manager sighed impatiently, tapping her pen again, louder this time. You're holding up paying clients. If you don't leave now, I'll have to call security. Danielle stayed where she was. Still. Anchored. Her silence was deafening. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country below. And if you believe in quiet strength, in dignity, in standing your ground the way Danielle does, tap like and subscribe. These moments matter. And we're glad you're here. Now back to Danielle. The spa wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. And everyone in that room was about to learn exactly who she was. The air inside Elon Spa had shifted. What was once serene now felt heavy, like every soft candle and every polished tile was holding its breath. The manager didn't seem to notice. She stood behind the counter with her chin high, flipping her pen between her fingers. Her voice cut through the quiet again, just loud enough for the guests to hear. I don't know how you got past the concierge, but we can't just let anyone stroll into our VIP suites because they say they belong. Another murmur swept through the room. A woman in a robe whispered to the man next to her, eyes darting toward Danielle, then quickly away when Danielle's calm gaze met hers. Danielle said nothing. She didn't have to. She just stood there, her dark eyes fixed on the manager, steady as stone, watching her words dig their own grave. Behind the counter, Naomi kept her head down. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen. Her jaw was tight now. From her angle, she could see what no one else had bothered to check, the reservation screen. A name sat there, already confirmed. A name she recognized from corporate memos. A name that should have ended this conversation before it began. But Naomi stayed quiet. For now. In the corner of the room, the man in gym clothes raised his phone again. The faint red glow of recording pulsed against his hand as he zoomed in. His lips moved silently as he whispered into his live stream. You're seeing this, right? She's not even yelling, not saying a word. But look at her face. Danielle's eyes flicked to him for half a second. A silent warning. Not yet. He lowered the phone slightly, but didn't stop recording. Another guest, a younger woman sitting by the fountain, leaned to her friend and muttered, "Why doesn't she just leave? It's so embarrassing." Danielle heard it, and she didn't flinch. The manager leaned forward against the counter now, her smirk widening into something uglier. "You've already been told," she said. "There's nothing for you here. I'd hate for this to escalate." Her voice dripped with satisfaction, as though she'd already won. Danielle tilted her head slightly. It wasn't submission. It was something closer to calculation, the way someone studies a chessboard before the final move. She spoke then, low and calm, the kind of calm that carried weight. "You're certain that's the choice you want to make?" The manager chuckled under her breath. "Sweetheart," she said, condescension thick in her tone, "I'm certain of a lot of things. And one of them is that you're wasting my time. Ours, too," she added, gesturing vaguely at the small crowd of onlookers. A man in a navy robe murmured to no one in particular, "She doesn't even look like she belongs here." Another guest chimed in from across the room. "They should just call security already." Danielle heard that too. She didn't flinch. Naomi's eyes darted between the manager and the screen again. Her hand tightened into a fist at her side before she forced it to relax. The man recording shifted his camera back toward the manager now, whispering into his feed. "She doesn't even know who she's talking to. I'm telling you, this is going to blow up." The spa was no longer serene. It was tense. Electric. Danielle exhaled, slow and deliberate. And in that breath was history. The kind of history that taught her patience, taught her how to let others expose themselves before she moved. Her voice was quiet when she spoke next, but it carried. "Run my name." And this time, it didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a warning. Naomi's eyes snapped to her screen again, the cursor blinking against the gold-highlighted reservation already waiting there. Owner-level clearance. Naomi swallowed hard. The manager didn't notice. She didn't even look. She just tapped her pen against the marble, sharper now, and called out over her shoulder. "Security. Front lobby. Now." Danielle didn't move. Her silence was louder than the harp music, louder than the whispers, louder than the insult. And everyone in that room could feel it. The weight of quiet eyes watching everything, recording everything, and promising that this moment wasn't over. Not yet. The click of hard soles on marble broke the silence. Two security guards emerged from a side hallway, their navy blazers stretched taut across broad shoulders. Neither of them was smiling. The taller one led the way, already reaching for his earpiece as he addressed the manager. "You called us." The manager straightened as though reinforcements justified her every word up to now. "Yes. Escort her out. She's disturbing the peace and refusing to leave." Her voice was louder now, full of conviction, like she needed everyone watching to know she was still in control. The guards turned their attention to Danielle. And then, they hesitated. There she stood, unmoving, unflinching, her gaze fixed on the manager. No fear in her posture. No pleading. Nothing about her presence fit the narrative they'd been summoned to enforce. The taller guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to step outside with us. You can resolve any misunderstanding at the front desk later." Danielle didn't so much as blink. Her reply was calm, her tone unchanged. "There is no misunderstanding." The manager let out a short laugh, brittle, sharp. "You see? She refuses. Go on. Do your job." The shorter guard stepped closer, his hand hovering just above her elbow, as if touching her would somehow make her compliance automatic. But he stopped short, because Danielle's eyes moved to his, and in that quiet stare was something heavier than anger. It was certainty, a certainty that unsettled him. From across the room, the young man filming whispered into his phone. "Here it comes. This is the part where she reminds them who she is." Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few started filming openly now, their phones raised without pretense. Naomi's fingers hovered above her keyboard, but her eyes stayed on Danielle. Her chest rose and fell faster now, and then the manager snapped her fingers toward the guards. "Well, you heard me. Remove her." The taller guard straightened his shoulders and tried again, louder this time. "Ma'am, we're asking you one last time. Come with us now, or we'll have to." Danielle finally turned her head, ever so slightly, to look at him fully. Her voice was quiet. measured. But the words made his hand drop back to his side. You're certain that's the choice you want to make? It wasn't a question. It was a line drawn in marble. And the tension cracked. A murmur of doubt rippled through the onlookers. Someone near the fountain said softly, "She's not wrong. Something's off about this." The gym-clothed man adjusted his camera angle and whispered again into the stream. "She hasn't even raised her voice. But look at him. He already looks like he regrets touching her." Danielle's gaze returned to the manager, and for the first time that afternoon, the smirk faltered. The manager cleared her throat and gestured more forcefully now. "Do it. Now." The shorter guard finally stepped forward and placed his hand on Danielle's arm. And the room reacted. A woman in a white robe gasped audibly. Naomi's fingers tightened into a fist. Phones flashed as they recorded the moment. The exact moment that a paying guest was manhandled in front of dozens of witnesses. Danielle didn't recoil. She didn't fight. She simply turned her head, locked eyes with the guard, and spoke, her voice ablaze against the silence. "That was your mistake." The words cut through the charged air, and the guard froze. For a single second, the entire spa held still. The water wall behind them murmured faintly, but nobody heard it. Every eye was on her. And though she stood still, though she didn't raise her hand or her voice, everyone could feel it now. That quiet storm gathering just beneath her surface. Whatever was coming next wasn't for them. But it was already too late to stop it. The guard's hand hovered over Danielle's arm, frozen by the weight of her words. "That was your mistake," she had said, calm, quiet, but heavy enough to make the marble beneath them feel like it might crack. He swallowed, glancing at his partner, whose brow was already furrowed. The manager's voice rose, sharp and defensive, filling the silence. "Why are you hesitating? Do your job. She's trespassing. We've already told her she doesn't belong here." But something had shifted. People were watching differently now. Guests who had earlier whispered their disapproval of Danielle now held their phones higher, angling for a better shot. A woman near the fountain muttered under her breath, "That doesn't look like trespassing to me." Naomi's chair creaked softly as she shifted behind the counter. Her fingers were trembling, but her eyes weren't on the screen anymore. They were on Danielle, and on the gold-highlighted name still sitting at the top of the reservation list. Owner-level clearance. Her lips parted slightly, like she might say something. But not yet. Not quite yet. Danielle's eyes flicked to Naomi for a second. A glance so quick most people missed it, and the faintest spark of acknowledgement passed between them. Then Danielle reached into her tote. No rush. No drama. She simply pulled out her phone and unlocked it with one practiced motion. She didn't even look at the manager when she raised it to her ear. "Avery," she said softly, so softly that most of the room had to lean forward to hear. The manager scoffed. "Oh, please," she sneered, folding her arms. "You're calling someone now? Go ahead, call whoever you want. It won't change anything." Danielle's gaze stayed on the floor, her voice level. Protocol 7. Effective immediately. And that was it. She lowered the phone and slipped it back into her bag. The manager blinked, confused by the brevity of it. What did you just say?" Danielle raised her eyes at last, locking onto her. "You'll know soon enough." That was when the first voice cracked through the tension. It was Naomi. Her words weren't loud, but they carried. "She's on the list." The manager spun on her, eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" Naomi's hands shook slightly as she gestured at her screen. "She's booked. VIP suite. Name's right here." For the first time all afternoon, the manager's smile faltered. But she recovered quickly, her voice rising to cover the doubt creeping into her expression. "That doesn't mean anything. You know how easy it is to fake a booking? These people know all the tricks. She's just trying to intimidate us." The taller guard stepped back slightly. His eyes shifted from the manager to Danielle, then to Naomi. Guests began murmuring louder now. "She's on the list?" someone asked. "I heard the girl say it," another replied. The man in gym clothes, still live streaming, whispered into his phone. "That's it. She's turning the whole room now. Watch this." Danielle didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her stillness was speaking for her, louder than the manager's frantic words, louder than the guard's quiet uncertainty, louder than anything. The manager slammed her palm on the counter. "Enough. You're still leaving." "Guards." But the guards hesitated. The taller one finally found his voice. "Ma'am, if she's on the list, she's not." The manager snapped, cutting him off, but her voice cracked mid-sentence. And that was when Naomi stood. For the first time since Danielle entered, Naomi pushed back her chair and stood up fully, her voice stronger now. She's on the list. VIP. And you know it. A hush fell over the room. The fountain gurgled faintly. The harp music played on, but no one was listening. Danielle's eyes didn't leave the manager. The manager's face flushed red as she sputtered. You don't know what you're talking about. Sit down before you lose your job. But Naomi didn't sit down. She straightened her shoulders and took a step closer to the counter, her gaze steady. I won't lie for you, she said quietly. Not this time. The words hit the room like a spark to dry kindling. Guests straightened. Phones rose higher. A low murmur of approval swept through the space. Danielle exhaled slowly, her eyes softening just enough to catch Naomi's for a fleeting second. And for the first time, anyone, stood on her side. But this was only the beginning. The silence after Naomi's quiet defiance was heavier than the marble beneath their feet. No one moved. No one even breathed. The manager's eyes narrowed into slits. Her voice rose higher now, cracking at the edges. You're making a very big mistake, Naomi. You think anyone's going to believe her over me? This woman doesn't belong here. But it was too late. Because the crowd was watching differently now. Phones were raised everywhere. Dozens of tiny red record lights blinked across the lobby. People leaned forward in their seats. A young woman in a white robe crossed her arms and said just loudly enough to be heard, She's booked. Your own girl just said it. Why are you still arguing? The murmur grew louder. Danielle still hadn't said a word. She simply reached into her tote again, this time drawing out a thin leather wallet. From it, she removed a single black card. No numbers, no name, just a sleek gold insignia in the center. She placed it silently on the counter, sliding it toward the manager. The manager stared at it like it might burn her fingers. But she didn't pick it up. Danielle's voice was quiet, but it carried through the room. That card opens every door in this building. Every suite. Every system. Run it. The manager's lip curled as though she wanted to spit back another insult. But she caught herself. Because the taller security guard was staring at the card now, too, and even he stepped back half a pace. Naomi moved quickly, her fingers clattering over the keyboard. Her screen flashed, loading a black and gold confirmation page. The words owner level, active appeared in bold at the top. Naomi swallowed and spoke, louder this time. She's not just booked. She owns the membership program. Her name's in the system as corporate. The manager's smirk disintegrated into something close to panic. That can't be right, she snapped, but her voice lacked conviction now. Yes, it is, Naomi shot back, finding her courage now. Her voice was firm, her shoulders squared. She owns it. The taller guard cleared his throat, stepping back fully now, his hands up in surrender. The shorter one followed, quietly muttering, we didn't know. The manager reached out for the card, her fingers trembling now. She tried to muster a smile, but it came out warped and desperate. Of course, I just didn't realize. Miscommunication, you understand. Happens all the time. Why didn't you say something sooner? Danielle's eyes stayed locked on hers. I wanted to see how far you'd go. The line was delivered flat, surgical, and it landed like a knife in the middle of the room. Someone in the back let out a low whistle. Another murmured, damn. And then, quietly, voices began to rise from the crowd. She didn't even raise her voice. They're the ones making a scene, not her. That girl told you. You didn't listen. The manager turned to Naomi, hissing through clenched teeth. You're done. You hear me? You're done here. Naomi straightened. And for the first time that day, her voice didn't tremble. No, you are. The words hung there, sharp and clean. The manager recoiled slightly, her face pale. And the room erupted, softly at first, then louder. Claps. Scattered at first, then growing into a rhythm, bouncing off the marble and glass. Danielle didn't react. She didn't smile, didn't even blink. She simply slipped the card back into her wallet, placed the wallet back into her tote, and looked the manager in the eye. Her voice dropped just enough to send a chill through the air. Step away from my counter. And to the shock of everyone watching, the manager did exactly that. The sound of clapping faded into an uneasy quiet. But the air in the lobby didn't relax. It tightened, charged with a different kind of energy now. The manager stepped back, her hands curling around the edge of the counter, trying to keep herself upright as Danielle's gaze stayed fixed on her. Danielle slid her toed up onto the marble, unhurried, and drew her phone out once more. The manager tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. All right, fine. You've made your point. No need to escalate anything further. We'll sort it all out. Danielle didn't answer. She tapped her screen and raised the phone to her ear. The faintest smile ghosted her lips, but it wasn't kind. Avery, she said, her voice low, calm. Protocol 7. Final stage. Freeze everything. There was a pause on the line, then a crisp reply. Yes, ma'am. Freezing branch operations now. Systems locked in 3, 2. Naomi's eyes darted to her computer screen. The reservations page suddenly grayed out. Every input field blinking, access denied. Behind her, the wall-mounted employee access panel flashed red. The quiet whir of the HVAC system dropped into silence as the building's internal controls powered down. 1. The voice on the other end of the phone was matter-of-fact. Branch frozen, waiting on further instructions. Danielle lowered the phone and set it on the counter in front of her. Naomi spoke first. The system, it's locked. I can't even log back in. From the hallway, one of the guards murmured, lights just cut in the staff rooms. Doors aren't opening either. The guests whispered louder now. She shut it all down. She didn't even touch anything, just one call. My God, she really owns it all. The manager's face drained of color. Her voice was brittle, panicked. You can't just shut down the spa. We have appointments. We have clients waiting. Danielle cut her off with nothing more than a glance. The manager's words died in her throat. Across the room, Naomi straightened to her full height. Her voice, quiet but clear, carried just enough to draw everyone's attention. She told you she belonged. You didn't believe her. And now you want to beg. A few guests chuckled at that, soft but sharp. Danielle's fingers drummed once on the marble counter before she spoke. I didn't come here to prove anything to you, she said evenly. But you forced my hand. Every insult, every look, every word in this room was yours to own. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And now, so are the consequences. She turned slightly toward Naomi. Staff login status? Naomi glanced back at her grayed-out screen. All logins revoked except corporate, she said, her voice steady despite the tension. Danielle nodded, then turned her attention back to the manager. You're done here. The words were soft, but final. The manager's hands gripped the counter tighter, her lip trembling. You can't fire me. Danielle tilted her head, her voice like ice. You fired yourself the second you opened your mouth. The murmur of approval from the guests grew louder now, some clapping again, some shaking their heads at the manager in disgust. Danielle leaned in just slightly, her words quiet enough for only the manager to hear. Look around you. Everyone in this room now knows exactly who you are. And exactly who I am. The manager swallowed hard, stepping back until her shoulder hit the back wall. Danielle straightened and picked up her phone from the counter, slipping it back into her tote. Her voice returned to its calm, deliberate tone as she addressed Naomi. Escort her out of my lobby. Naomi blinked, then smiled faintly. With pleasure, she said. And just like that, the tide of the room turned fully. Guests clapped louder now. Someone near the back said aloud what everyone else was thinking. She owns this place. And she owns her now too. Danielle didn't look back as Naomi moved toward the manager. She just stood there, perfectly still, perfectly composed, as the last scraps of the manager's false authority crumbled right there on the marble floor. And still, Danielle hadn't raised her voice once. The sound of Naomi's heels clicking against the marble was sharper now, louder than the harp music still playing somewhere overhead. She stepped behind the counter and took the manager's elbow. Ma'am, she said simply, her tone flat but polite. We'll take it from here. The manager resisted at first, jerking her arm away. You can't. You don't have the right. But Naomi's grip tightened, and her eyes flashed with something no one had ever seen in her before. You don't give orders here anymore. Now move. The lobby erupted in murmurs. A man in a robe leaned forward in his seat, whispering to the woman beside him. She really just fired her on the spot. The woman smirked, watching the manager's face pale as Naomi guided her around the counter. She didn't even have to yell. That's how you know. And then the phones went up again. The gym-clothed man, still live streaming, shifted to capture every step of what quickly became a walk of shame. His voice was quiet but steady into his mic. This is justice, y'all. She tried to throw her out of her own building. Look at her now. The manager kept her head down, her cheeks blotchy, her breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts as Naomi steered her toward the doors. Someone at the back clapped once, a crisp, deliberate clap, and the sound caught on. Soon more followed. Not loud or raucous, but rhythmic. Naomi opened the glass doors and all but pushed the woman out into the cool evening air. The manager stumbled, caught herself, then froze outside, realizing everyone on the sidewalk was staring now too, drawn by the noise and the phones held up to the windows. The door hissed shut behind her, sealing her out. Inside, the room stilled again. Danielle hadn't moved. She was still standing in the center of the lobby, her tote slung back over her shoulder, her eyes fixed on Naomi, who straightened her blazer as she walked back. Their eyes met. Naomi spoke first. "She's gone." Danielle only nodded. "Good." Naomi hesitated, then added, just loud enough for Danielle to hear. "She's treated all of us like that for years. You just finally stopped her." Danielle's gaze softened, just a fraction, and she replied quietly, "No, you did the second you told the truth." Naomi blinked at that, her cheeks warming faintly, and lowered her eyes as she returned to her post behind the counter. The tension in the room eased, but the electricity lingered. Guests shifted now, their murmurs different. Admiring. Awed. That's how you do it. She didn't even raise her voice. She knew exactly who she was the whole time. The gym-clothed man, still recording, turned his phone on himself now, speaking directly into his audience. "Take notes, y'all. This is how you hold your ground. Quiet power. No shouting. No begging." And everybody here just watched her shut it all down with one call. Danielle caught his eye as he spoke, and for the first time all evening, a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She adjusted the strap of her tote and turned toward Naomi again. Status of the branch. Naomi checked the screen, still frozen. All employee access revoked. Client operations locked. The system's waiting for your command. Danielle nodded. "Good. Leave it frozen. I'm not done yet." Naomi straightened. "Yes, ma'am." The guests exchanged glances at that. A ripple of realization passed through them. She wasn't just shutting this place down to make a point. She was shutting it down to clean house. Danielle finally moved, stepping closer to the counter. She tapped her fingers on the marble slowly, rhythmically, before speaking again. "Who else here has been complicit?" Naomi stiffened, but answered honestly. "Mostly her. But the assistant manager, the head of concierge. They've all looked the other way." Danielle's gaze sharpened at that. "Good," she said again, her voice quiet but heavy. "Make a list." Naomi reached for a pad of paper without hesitation, her pen poised and ready. And as Danielle turned back toward the lobby, toward the guests still watching, still whispering, still holding their cameras up, she let the silence stretch just long enough to make her next words land like a hammer. "Tonight," she said, her voice low but carrying, "the entire culture of this branch changes. Permanently." The guests stilled, their admiration clear now, their applause starting again, soft at first, but growing. Danielle didn't smile. She just stood there, letting it build, letting them feel it, the weight of what she'd done and what she was still about to do. And she knew they'd never forget it. The applause tapered off, but the hush that followed felt heavier now, an almost reverent silence, as though everyone in the room sensed that what came next would define everything. Danielle didn't rush. She stood at the counter, fingers drumming lightly on the marble, her eyes scanning the lobby slowly. One by one, the guests looked away when her gaze passed over them, like she could see through them, like she already knew who would stand with her and who would cower. Her voice, when it came, was calm, measured. "Naomi," she said, her tone more a statement than a question. "Yes, ma'am," Naomi replied immediately, her notepad already in hand. "Read me the names." Naomi's pen hovered for half a second before she began. Assistant Manager, Paul Jennings. Head of Concierge, Lila Torres. Front Desk Senior, Tanya Simmons. And, she hesitated, the Regional Director, though he only visits monthly. Danielle's jaw tightened slightly at that last name, but she said nothing. Instead, she held out her hand. The phone. Naomi handed it over without question. Danielle scrolled through her contacts, tapped the number, and pressed the phone to her ear. She didn't pace. She didn't fidget. She just stood there, the picture of quiet command, as the line rang. A man's voice answered on the third ring, polished, confident. "Yes, Miss Hayes." Danielle didn't bother with pleasantries. I want the assistant manager, head of concierge, and senior front desk staff terminated immediately, she said evenly. As for the regional director, freeze his accounts pending full investigation, and pull his clearance from all branches until further notice. On the other end, there was a faint pause. Then, yes, ma'am. Consider it done. Danielle hung up and handed the phone back to Naomi. Then she turned to the room. They're done, she announced, her voice carrying without effort. Effective now. The lobby erupted, not in panic, but in quiet approval. The man in gym clothes muttered into his live stream. She just fired half the damn leadership in one call. Y'all see this? You see why she runs the whole thing. A woman in a robe nodded to herself, crossing her arms. Should have happened years ago. And then another voice, this time from the corner of the lobby. I saw the name, someone said. It was a junior attendant, barely more than 20, still in her crisp uniform. She stepped forward, her cheeks flushed, but her voice clear. Her reservation. Her name was at the top of the list. I saw it this morning. I didn't say anything because, she trailed off, ashamed. Danielle's eyes softened just slightly. You were afraid, she finished for her. I know. The girl nodded, her lip trembling. Danielle gave the faintest of nods in return, just enough to let her know she'd been seen, heard, and forgiven. And then she looked back to Naomi. Draft a memo, she said. Effective tonight. All staff at this branch are required to complete additional anti-bias training before resuming duties. Failure to comply will result in permanent dismissal. The memo should be posted before I leave this building. Yes, ma'am, Naomi said, already scribbling furiously. Danielle turned slightly, her eyes sweeping over the guests one last time. Most of them dropped their gazes when she passed over them, but a few met her stare and nodded quietly, their respect clear now. The manager's absence was still palpable, but so was the shift in the air, the sense that justice, even if late, had finally arrived. The junior attendant who'd spoken up earlier whispered under her breath, "Thank you." Danielle didn't reply. She just adjusted the strap of her tote on her shoulder, turned back to the counter, and waited as Naomi hit the keys that would lock the terminated staff out of the system in real time. Naomi glanced up a moment later, her voice almost triumphant. Done. They're locked out. Danielle nodded once. Good, she said. And as the guests in the lobby looked on, most of them recording still, they all realized the same thing at the same time. That this wasn't just about a reservation. This was about a reckoning. And Danielle Hayes had delivered it with nothing more than quiet power, perfect posture, and words that cut deeper than any raised voice ever could. Naomi's fingers hovered over the keyboard, the monitor still glowing red with the words "System Frozen." She looked up, awaiting Danielle's next command. Danielle's gaze swept the room once more. The weight of her quiet presence still anchored the air, but something had changed. Now, the quiet wasn't fear. It was respect. Guests watched her openly now, no longer hiding their cameras, no longer pretending not to see. Danielle straightened slightly, her tone even and deliberate. Re-enable access, she said, but only for essential staff. Only those who haven't been dismissed. Naomi nodded immediately, typing in the override sequence. The screen blinked back to life, green this time. As the words "access restored," limited appeared. She glanced back at Danielle. All done. No access for terminated accounts. All remaining staff are back online. Danielle nodded once. Good. Keep it that way. No one reinstates those accounts without my signature. Yes, ma'am. Across the room, guests began murmuring more audibly now, but this time, it was admiration. That's how you do it, someone said softly. She didn't just shut it down, another added. She fixed it. Right in front of all of us. The gym-clothed man lowered his phone for the first time all night, shaking his head with a faint smile. I wish my daughter could see this, he muttered to himself. Then, louder, so she could hear. Thank you. For standing your ground. For showing us how it's done. Danielle's eyes met his briefly, and though she didn't smile, her slight nod was enough to answer. Another voice rose from the back, a woman in her 40s, still in her robe, clutching her phone to her chest. You didn't just make them listen, she said, her voice quiet but clear. You made us see that we don't have to shrink. The words hung in the air for a moment before others joined in. One by one, people nodded, some saying simply, thank you. Others clapping softly, their respect no longer hesitant. Naomi glanced around at the faces turned toward Danielle now. The same faces that had just hours before watched in judgment, and felt something shift in her chest. She smiled faintly as she looked back at the screen, watching the system settle into its new state. Order. Fairness. Danielle turned toward the counter and picked up her phone, dialing quickly. Avery, she said as soon as the line connected. Branch is stabilized. Essential access only. All dismissed personnel accounts are permanently disabled. Notify HR to process the terminations. Yes, ma'am, Avery replied crisply. Anything else? Danielle paused, glancing toward Naomi. Yes, she said finally. Flag Naomi Ruiz for immediate promotion review. Effective tomorrow. Naomi froze, her breath catching in her throat. Yes, ma'am, Avery confirmed before hanging up. Naomi blinked, her cheeks flushing faintly as she looked back at Danielle. Danielle's expression didn't change, but the faintest lift at the corner of her lips was all Naomi needed to understand. The gym-clothed man spoke up again, this time addressing the room, his voice carrying now. She owns this place, and she earned every bit of it. Applause rose, louder now, fuller, no longer cautious or scattered, but solid, united. Danielle didn't bask in it. She simply turned, adjusted her tote on her shoulder, and let her gaze sweep over the room one last time, taking in the guests, the staff, the building she'd built and defended. And in that silence, everyone watching knew the truth. The room belonged to her now. The applause faded into quiet, but not the kind of quiet the Elon Spa had known before. This quiet carried a different weight, heavy with realization, with respect, with the kind of collective awe that only comes after witnessing something undeniable. Danielle stood motionless at the counter, her tote back on her shoulder, her gaze steady. The gym-clothed man raised his phone again, focusing on her face now. His livestream audience had swelled into the thousands. Comments scrolled so fast they blurred. Queen. This is power. Dignity in motion. She owns the building and the moment. He whispered into the mic. She hasn't raised her voice once. Not once. And yet she owns everybody in here. Danielle let her eyes drift over the room one last time. At the corner, the young junior attendant, the one who'd finally spoken up, stood straighter now, no longer avoiding her gaze. Near the fountain, the woman who'd muttered earlier about Danielle embarrassing herself now looked down at the floor, her face flushed with shame. Even Naomi, still behind the counter, watched with a faint smile and tears clinging to her lashes, clutching the notepad where she'd scribbled the names of the dismissed. Danielle turned her head just slightly, fixing her eyes on the door, the very same door through which she'd been told to leave just minutes earlier. Her heels clicked once against the marble as she took a deliberate step forward. Then another. The guests instinctively parted, creating a quiet pathway for her to cross the room. Phones followed her, cameras capturing every angle as if each step she took was a lesson in what quiet power truly looked like. Halfway to the door, Danielle paused. The harp music from above tinkled faintly, hollow and insignificant against the sound of her voice as she finally spoke. Low, steady, cutting straight through the room. You told me I didn't belong here, she said, her eyes on no one and everyone all at once. You said people could see it. She let the words hang for a moment, heavy and undeniable. Then she turned slightly, just enough to let her gaze sweep back across the lobby, at Naomi, at the guests, at the vacant counter now stripped of its false authority. Well, she continued, her voice sharpening just enough to draw shivers. I hope they're still watching. And with that, she turned back toward the door. The gym-clothed man gasped softly into his livestream mic. She just ended them. On camera. Did y'all hear that? Behind her, a ripple of murmurs followed. I hope they're still watching. Someone repeated under their breath, almost like a prayer. The words settled into the walls, into the marble, into every phone that caught the moment. Danielle reached for the handle of the glass door, but didn't push it yet. Instead, she glanced once more over her shoulder, and this time, she made eye contact with Naomi. And Naomi, smiling now through the tears welling in her eyes, mouthed two simple words. Thank you. Danielle gave the faintest of nods before stepping through the door. The cool air from outside swept into the lobby as the glass hissed shut behind her. And inside, the guests stayed frozen in place, their phones still held high, their faces a mixture of awe and quiet shame, because they all knew what they'd just seen. A woman who had been told she didn't belong, teaching them all who really did. The air outside was cool against her skin, sharp with evening chill and faint hints of city exhaust. Danielle stepped onto the sidewalk, the door whispering shut behind her. But she wasn't alone. A small crowd had gathered outside the Elon Spa, drawn by the flashes of phones through the windows, the muffled applause, the sound of heels striking marble in deliberate rhythm. And now, they stood waiting. For her. As she emerged, a hush fell over them. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Phones rose instinctively. She's the one. Someone murmured from the back. That's her. From the live. The gym-clothed man's stream, still running in his hand, now read 38,412 viewers, live. His voice quivered as he narrated. She's outside now, y'all. She didn't just shut the spa down, she shut them up. You're looking at a masterclass. The crowd parted as Danielle moved forward, her pace unhurried. And then the clapping started again. One pair of hands, then another, then more, soft at first, but growing as people realized what they were witnessing. By the time she reached the curb, the sound had swelled into a steady, deliberate rhythm. Danielle didn't look back. Not yet. But she felt it. The weight of eyes following her, the subtle shift of the crowd tilting toward her, the energy of a moment that was no longer just hers but everyone's. Behind the glass, she could see Naomi at the counter, still standing tall, watching her leave. Their eyes met through the pane for one last heartbeat before Danielle's gaze drifted past her, to the manager. The former manager. She stood outside now, just off to the side, clutching her purse like it could shield her from what she'd unleashed. Her shoulders were hunched, her hair falling out of its neat twist, her eyes darting between Danielle and the cameras. And though her lips pressed tight as though she wanted to say something, she didn't. She couldn't. Because in this moment, no words could undo what had already been written. In marble, in memory, in thousands of live-stream comments screaming her downfall into permanence. Danielle's phone buzzed faintly in her tote. She reached for it as she continued walking, glancing down at the notification. Avery. All major outlets have picked up the footage. Trending #1 already. Recommend no statement yet. She tucked the phone back without responding. Her silence would say enough. The junior attendant who'd spoken up earlier had slipped outside too, standing just beyond the doors. Danielle caught her eye briefly as she passed, and the young woman straightened, her cheeks flushed. Danielle gave her a faint nod, just enough for her to know she'd been seen, her courage acknowledged. The applause swelled once more as Danielle stepped off the curb, her heels clicking against the pavement as she moved toward her waiting car. A child in the crowd, no more than 8, tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Who is she?" he asked, eyes wide. His mother leaned down, whispering into his ear, though Danielle still heard it. Someone who reminds people where they really stand. And the boy's gaze stayed fixed on her as she reached the car door and paused. Danielle finally looked back then, her dark eyes sweeping over the glass facade of the spa one last time. Inside, through the reflection of dozens of camera flashes, she could still see the former manager watching her, small now, diminished, clutching her own shame. Danielle held her gaze just long enough for the woman to look away. Then, and only then, did Danielle allow herself the faintest smile before slipping into the car. The door shut with a soft, satisfying click. And behind her, the crowd roared. The car's interior was quiet. The hum of the city outside was muffled by thick glass, the roar of applause fading as the driver eased the car away from the curb. Danielle sat back against the seat, her tote in her lap, her posture still perfect. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Avery. Footage trending in 54 countries. Hashtag she owns it projected to hit 20 million views by midnight. CNN requests a statement. MSNBC too. Do you wish to respond? She locked the screen without replying and set the phone aside. The world could wait. She gazed out the tinted window, watching the spa shrink into the distance behind her. It was just a building. But tonight, it had become a stage. And everyone, from the guests who whispered, to the staff who looked away, to the manager who dared to speak those words aloud, had played their part perfectly. Danielle exhaled, slow and quiet, the faintest curve of a smile ghosting her lips. In her mind, she could still hear the manager's voice. You don't belong here. People can see that. And she could still feel the way the room had gone still when she answered her. Not with raised tones or frantic protests, but with stillness. With power. Because belonging was never hers to beg for. It was already hers. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror, then back at the road. Destination, ma'am? Danielle didn't look up. Home, she said. The driver nodded and turned north. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she picked it up, scrolling through the sea of comments and headlines already flooding in. Queen energy. She never even raised her voice. Black excellence. Live and unbothered. She didn't just shut them down, she shut them up. Danielle smiled faintly to herself, almost despite herself, and whispered under her breath. Let them keep watching. The driver caught her eye in the mirror and ventured a quiet question. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, how do you stay that calm? Even when... He hesitated, unsure how to finish. Even when they come at you like that? Danielle's gaze drifted from the window back to his. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the quiet like a blade. Because every time they tell me I don't belong, she said, I remember whose name is on the deed. She looked back out the window, her reflection meeting her eyes in the glass, sharp, poised, unbending. The city lights streaked by in gold and white. And somewhere behind her, the cameras were still rolling, the crowd still buzzing, the world still learning what it means to see dignity, real dignity, in action. Her fingers drummed once against her tote before settling. She didn't need their apology. She didn't need their approval. She'd already won. And as the car disappeared into the night, the faintest echo of her words seemed to hang in the air behind her, for everyone who had doubted her to hear. You mistook silence for weakness. That was your last mistake. And this time, they were still watching.